Welcome to Calspeed's monthly recap. This is the month of April. I'm alongside race director Mike Smith and our guest and newly crowned Ironman champion and first-time A-main winner, the first man to do the triple, Adam Nagao.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was wild.
Thank you for joining me. We just got off track not that long ago. We just had the sprint series. We went into the day with a sub-championship to be decided. Three guys and a female battling for the championship, all within 15 points, all within a chance. We went into the A-main with three of them still having a chance, one of them an outside chance. And it turned out the person who didn't actually show up this round, Ashley Arnott, won the championship.
Absolutely.
Mike, let's talk about how the A-main developed. Going in, we knew that certain people had very small windows that they had to hit to beat Ashley. She had such a great drop. Let's talk about how this A-main developed, and congratulations to Sean Fite on winning it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where you get the W and you're not the talking point, right? And we said congratulations, Sean. Everything else was about points championships. So, I mean, at the end of the day, kudos to Ashley. She put in 3 strong rounds. She made it tough for these guys to actually make things happen. So she's the sub-champion because of those first 3 rounds. But what it came down to was actually needing to get those guys at the sharp end. Luis Calderon had a shot at it. He had the best shot, if you will. He needed a 4th or better. And Caden, starting all the way back in 14th, Caden Thur had to make it all the way up and win to actually get that sub-championship. Luis started 5th, so his, like I said, the better shot at it, that was there. But at the end of the day, it was Sean Fite taking the victory, and it was Ashley taking the championship.
Yeah, I think Ashley deserves a lot of credit in the sense that up until this point, this first 4 rounds, she has 0 hardware. She has no podiums. She's finished 4th. You compare that to Luis, who has a win. Bermudez, who's been up front, he may not have any hardware, but he's been the most consistent of them. Caden, who has 3 podiums, but her consistency got her this championship. Let's talk about how important that is, especially for you, going into the Ironman. How important is consistency to take a championship, especially a sub-championship that's so short?
I think consistency has a lot to do with it. But you have to at the same time not be, you'll have people that say, oh, it's good points day, it's good points day. You can't really do that. At a certain point you have to realize, okay, hey, I kind of do have to get at it, right? Like, it's good to be consistent, but you can't find yourself being okay with just being consistent.
Well, and to that point, right? I mean, you have Ashley. She was consistent, a 4th, and I believe her other round, her worst round aside from today, was a 6th, I believe. So that's consistent, no hardware. But when you're consistently still finishing in front of your primary contenders, because remember, she was getting beat by mostly 2R drivers, which aren't going to be in the hunt anyway. So technically, she was winning races, if you want to look at it that way. So consistency, but not consistently 2nd or 3rd to the guys we're trying to beat.
And to that end, now we have these 2R guys that are wrapping up, right? We don't have Sean anymore. We don't have Nick anymore. We have these 2R guys.
Ariel, you don't have any of those the top guys. Yeah.
So this next half of the season is going to be really interesting to see who can get in control and lead these things.
Yeah.
Let's take a moment and acknowledge a couple of the guys that had amazing days in sprint today. I want to start off with Thomas or TJ Blackledge. He was up front. He qualified, I believe, 3rd.
Second,
so he qualified 2nd.
Yeah,
you're correct.
He was on pole for Heat 2.
Yeah, he was on pole for Heat 2. He ran up front. He just missed the podium. But let's talk about the sprint and developing guys.
Oh, yeah.
He was a guy that's made a couple of A's, but now he's rocketed up to the front.
Absolutely. Thomas has been making a huge improvement throughout this season. Started doing things at the clinics late last year, started getting into it. Thomas is getting better and better and better. And the first thing that we see is pace. Pace is always the first thing that gets better, and it's been getting very, very good for him. Thomas, just looking at this, 106.3 is the time that he put up. Fastest lap of the race was 106.2 by Caden. So only a 10th off the fastest lap of the race. He was smart. He hung out in 3rd the entire time, stuck right with the 2R drivers the entire race. Been working with him a lot in the clinic, and the kid just keeps getting better and better. And I'll tell you what, there's not a nicer kid in the entire paddock.
No, that's very true. I had a chance to speak with him. Adam, you've had a chance to watch the 4 sprint races so far. Let's talk about these first 4 races. Has there been like a moment that really stands out, a highlight, or something that that was just fun to watch from the pit lane?
Well, I think definitely today, I think Caden showed the biggest drive we've seen so far. He came from way back to make his way up to third. That was really impressive. But I don't know. Other than that, I've mostly seen like 2R drivers dominating this thing. And we have these other people that are fighting for points. They're just kind of hanging out, playing it safe behind these 2R guys. But I hope that changes, and it should change.
Well, and to that point, right? We've had 4 rounds. We've had 3 2R drivers, or 3 2R winners. The sole person to actually get a W, Luis Calderon. Right,
correct.
so he's one of the title contenders. He's the only guy to actually win that's not a 2R driver. To your point earlier, we're going to see a lot more of that, hopefully, as the 2R drivers start to dwindle.
Okay, before we move on to the rest of the day, the Ironman Championship, is there anyone that you're looking forward to in the second half that you think is going to make that leap? Right now, you have, points-wise, you have Ashley is at 380. You have Luis, who's 5 points behind at 825. And then Caden, who's at 822. So it's an 8-point gap between the first 3. Then you fall back a little ways. You have Bermudez. You have Jasinski, Don Diego Valoria, Lawson, Bastian. Is there anyone that you think can make a leap into that top 3? Last year we had a driver fall out, and that's why we had that's how Vince ended up winning 3rd place. Do you guys see anybody that you think can get up into that upper echelon?
Well, for me, I mean, what's interesting on my end is that I actually, with a lot of these sprint guys, I work with a lot of them doing a lot of coaching and stuff like that. I think not in the conversation right now. Like in the conversation, you've got the people who are going for the championship today, right? Caden, Ashley, Luis, and Alex. So those are guys that are in there. Alex is a little bit off right now with the point gap, but he actually, on the total points, is one of the stronger drivers in the group. So he's still in that conversation. Just outside the top 4, I think that the number 1 person I'm keeping an eye on is Don Diego Valoria. I think that's a driver where the pace is getting better and better and better. The craft isn't there yet, and that's really what we're seeing. Again, with guys like Blackledge, right there, not a move in sight. Now, I don't know if it's because there's 2R drivers in front of him or because, hey, I'm on the podium, but hey, no moves to be had. Don's the same way. Pace is there, but we're not seeing the moves. As the season progresses, as the 2R drivers are not in the field, I think you're going to see guys like Don start to move up. Guys like Jasinski we expect to be at the sharp end, right?
Yeah.
He's a contender. He was a contender last year. So he's not a surprise. Dwayne Lawson, he's a contender for the Grand Masters Championship in the Super Series, being at the sharp end there. So not a big surprise to see him at the front. Aside from that, I think we could see some one-off runs where things just click with some of the drivers that are between 6th and maybe 15th. And there's a lot of people just getting better. It's going to be really fun to watch the second half of the season.
Well, I'll just say, whoever out of the top 10 or whatever in points who runs Grands, I think that's who we're going to see do well, right? You go into Grands, maybe it's their first time, they're going to get a feel for it. It's a little bit of different driving, but they'll see, they get to race with some really good people, right, outside of this country as well. And, that's where they're going to improve, right? So maybe I'm guessing someone in this top 10 runs Grands, gets some confidence, and then second half of the season, they're able to control the races and lead the races, which we really haven't seen so far, right?
Correct.
But yeah, that's what I hope to happen.
To that point, I mean, the Sprint Series where you're kind of cutting your teeth, you're dialing things in for the Super Series and beyond. We've seen rookies in the Super Series do the Grands and get better. With the experience cap and the level, if you will, of the Sprint Series drivers, is there a point where they need to get before they should enter Grands, or is there no, jump in and make it happen? What do you guys think?
I've always recommended even if you're gonna run like 20th at a field of 25, just having that experience of running with those guys, running a long weekend, getting a ton of laps in, and most importantly, qualifying, which I think is like learning how to qualify and be a good qualifier. That was the thing I learned most from my first Grands experience. I mean, it's invaluable because you have to qualify before all of these races except for Ironmans.
Right.
So,
you know what I think it is the biggest thing about racing in these carts is all mental, right? No one's really that much faster than each other, right? It's just the mental game behind it, right? So if you go into something like Grands and there's all these good drivers, international drivers, you're driving with national champions, you're going to get that experience, you're going to get that boost. And that's all you need.
Yeah.
Right? You need that mental game.
Get some confidence going into the next race, whatever it may be.
Yeah, because then, you can treat the next race as, it's just another race. I've done grands. I've raced against champions. This is just some heat race, right?
Exactly.
So,
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you are a Sprint Series driver, sign up.
shameless plug.
Shameless
That's
plug.
what we do.
Yeah. We'll see if anyone takes it in the second half. We have a driver pop in, and I can't think of any drivers that don't run sprint that are going to pop in and do exactly like what someone else mentioned, which is take a sub-championship like Matt Hart did.
Certainly Matt Hart, but also you got a year before in the Ironman was Aaron Downs.
Yeah.
He only runs the last 4. So that's another thing too. If you haven't started running now, or maybe you had a horrible first half of the year, hit the reset button. You got grands, get yourself ready, and then go run 4 solid rounds and win yourself a sub-championship. Win that summer sub-championship.
Yeah.
A little feather in the cap before you start maybe bumping up to Super Series next year.
Yeah, they give out trophies for those too.
Yeah, apparently.
Let's talk about the guy who's going to earned himself a trophy. You didn't even have to show up today, but you got yourself a trophy. Ironman Championship. Let's talk a little bit about today's race, which we had the Colombian flavor up front. Congratulations to Diego Morales, Andres Prieto, who finished second, and then Mark Connell, who's just squeaked in there for third. It was a very interesting race, especially for myself from the seat. And I'd like to hear Adam's opinion. He had a better day than I did. So, Mike, let me ask you, how did it play out? I mean, it played out very differently than it has the rest of the season, which is kind of why those of us that use the normal strategy for the first 3 races, which is stay out, run some laps, wait till the end of pit. It was surprising to see the guys that pitted first lap that actually work out.
Well, but it's not the first time, right?
No.
We saw Hayes make that happen. I think it was actually in the opener where he didn't end up winning, but I think he pit early and was able to make things happen. Or maybe actually it was still a counterclockwise track where he ended up in front with you guys. I think it was actually Technico where he pit early and then ended up doing both of his pits right out of the gate. I think both you guys did. And you were running right with the leaders overall who hadn't pit at the time because it was a shorter lap. So it could be done. It's happened before. This particular case is different. It's one of the longer laps that we have around here. It's a minute 6 and change. But yeah, we had a big swing in strategies. Up to this point, there's been a group of people that has just worked their way through to the front, and then we've had other people who have tried pitting early and see if that works. What usually burns those people is they have no help.
Correct.
Right out of the gate, it was Morales, Prieto, and Bravo, the triple threat back there, just working together. 3 drivers playing it smart, experienced guys who know how to make things happen. And while Morales and Prieto ended up dropping Bravo eventually, it was still right out of the gate smart moves. Meanwhile, everybody else is working their way through everybody. And I think that's the big difference, is that it wasn't quite as, let's say, smooth sailing for some of the usual suspects to make it through, Adam being one of those guys.
It's funny. I was talking to Diego after the race, and I was like, congrats on the win. He's like, you want to know a secret? He was like, Andres called me like 2 weeks ago and was like, you know what? I feel like doing something different. Let's pit lap 1. And Diego was like, nah, that's dumb. He was like, that's not a good idea. And he said Andres like slowly convinced him like, let's go for it. And like he said he got to the track today and he looked at Andres. He was like, you still want to do that? And Andres just kind of looked at him and was like, yeah, let's just go for it. So they ended up. That was ended
Andres who has nothing really to lose, right?
Exactly.
Diego's in the championship hunt.
Oh yeah, exactly. Andres had nothing to lose. So yeah, it was interesting seeing that work out, and some of us got to the front, and I got to the lead, and I had no idea what anything was going on behind me. I couldn't judge if they were gaining on me. I figured it out at some point, but I couldn't judge those guys. I knew they pitted, but I had no idea what was going on.
One of the old indoor tricks is to find a spot on the track, find 20 seconds roughly where that's going to be. Do you guys still do that for your deltas?
I totally try and do that. The hard part with 20 seconds and with Grande is there's not like an easy place. Like you're either coming at it, like the only place that it's clear that you're seeing them is you're going into Horseshoe. But even then you're trying to set up for the corner. It's just hard to find like a marker. It's not like where you're going on the front stretch, you're coming at the start-finish line, and you see them on the other side. You're like, okay, they're coming at a Grande.
Right.
It's not like that because they're coming through Horseshoe, or there in Long Beach or going into Horseshoe. Like it's Grande is one of the few tracks that it's very difficult to find that visual delta, at least for myself.
What was it like from you? I mean, you've done basically the same program all year, and that's work my way to the front all the way through. It's worked. The last 2 races you had won. This one it was a little bit difficult, more difficult, if you will. What was the big difference from your seat?
Well, I feel like Grande, especially Grande Normal Direction, is a track that everyone is really close on. So working my way up to the front took longer than I had hoped it would, and eventually did. But by then I knew it was just too long. I already knew when I got in front of you, I was like, it was too long. I knew it.
At that point, do you feel like I committed to this, so...
At that point, it's like, okay, I'm going to lead as many laps as I can and get those bonus points.
So did you change the strategy at that point? Or did you change the mindset where, like, well, maybe not a W, but I got to stay out to get these points?
Yeah, just the mindset of just saying, okay, I'm going to get these bonus points and that'll be it. And see where I end up. So.
Yeah, which you ended up 6th, I think.
6th, yeah.
So still not a terrible run from 20-something. Yeah, so not terrible. I think matching your worst run of the year, isn't it? Do you have
no,
two
he had a fourth.
I have a fourth. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, this
is horrible. This is a horrible race.
You need to quit. You need to just quit. Yeah, just give up on it.
To that point, though, a 4th, a 6th, and a pair of wins. Got to be as far as the overall championship. You got to feel really good going into the second part of the year.
Yeah, we have some interesting tracks coming up. We have Classico Normal, we have Classico CCW, and then Grande CCW, and then Technico CCW. So, I'm talking with Taylor a little bit. I'm like, hey, Taylor, you know what's next? And, he perks up, of course, and he's like, it's Classico. I'm like, yeah, but you know what's after that? So.
Well, and that's a great point. Like, remember at the turn of the year, all last year, we were talking about how there's certain people who just seem to click on the counterclockwise. West End came up. He's just really good when we go reverse. I think you might be the new counterclockwise guy. It just seems to be that you are just clicking. What is the difference? Now, so going to this one, you come off of 2 counterclockwise tracks, you win 2 races, you're strong. What's the approach on Grande, which we hadn't been on since, I think, November or October last year?
I mean, the obvious answer is go fast, right? But, outside of that, I feel like this track is a little harder to pass on. The hairpin is kind of, sometimes you can make it work, sometimes it's a little sketchy. But, I mean, it's always the same approach. Go as fast as you can, search for the 10th, right? You go through a corner, like, sure, that was quick, but, I can get a little bit more out of it. And that's all I've been trying to do this year, right? And we had spoken at the banquet, and you asked me, what are you going to do for this year? And I said, I'm going to get every single 10th I can.
Right. Seems to be working so far.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about. Let's give some props to a couple guys that ran really well in the Ironman. Kelly Bastion blew by me, and he was a rocket ship. A couple other guys like Henry started pretty far back. He and Andres both were not in the invert. Mm-hmm. It was a very close race. We have 26 guys that finished on the lead lap today. 26 guys finished on the lead lap.
26 out of 30.
Out of 30. Yeah, you have 28 eligible for the invert. Do you think that was indicative? What do you think that was indicative of? The carts, the track, everyone being comfortable with it, maybe various strategies. Do you equate that to anything?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, what we're doing on these days too is we're always, after we get done with the clinic and we go around with all the drivers, like, hey, is there anything that you seems like really off? Like the last Ironman that we had, or the last one of these days, they're like, no, we don't really see anything that's really off. I asked them again today. It's like, well, there might be a couple of carts that are maybe a little bit quick, but everything seems to be pretty close. Not a lot of dogs. So I could say carts because, obviously I'd want to say the carts are really close. But to be honest, I got to go kind of with what Adam's saying about it's the type of track. It's a little bit longer track, so that helps. But Grande counterclockwise isn't that much different than this as far as lap time goes. I think it might just be the nature of the track. It's a little bit more flowing. Rob Niles, who owns the place, he would say that this is the way it's designed. This is the way it's supposed to go. Counterclockwise is wrong. It should never happen. It does flow better this way. And I think with that flow, it's a little bit easier to pick up and get in a rhythm and those kind of things. So you have less mistakes, less people having a hard time finding the pace. If you look at the people who are at the back end of the field here, they are, quote, newer kind of drivers. They don't have the experience. One actually had a penalty. So take away that penalty, take away the mechanical we did have, and literally it would have been 28 out of 30 on the lead lap. That says more, I think, about the drivers that we have than anything else.
Yeah, I think like I said before, Grande normal direction is everyone's really close, and if you can win on Grande, you're doing it right.
Yeah.
You know, the field is always really close.
Which is why you didn't win.
Exactly.
And speaking of which, too, I mean, Diego Morales came out and won. He knows how to drive. He knows how to make things happen. He's a smart guy. Not a lot of mistakes. Had help, which you need to have in these races, right? You know, you've been working with the last 2 races with John Kimbrell. Most of the time working together. At least having a okay, you gotta move, go ahead. You know, just being smart. Those 2 guys were smart as well. So Diego getting the win. Andreas, his one run, gets up on the podium with this crazy 1 lap pit deal. But then how about Mark Connell, 3rd place there? I mean, making things happen with the 3rd, and he had to earn it. It was actually him in 4th there with Sean Fite just in front of him. And both those guys had season best finishes. But they looked strong the entire time. They were always in that front group. In fact, with Diego and Prado being a little bit further back, the lead group was Connell, Fite, and Nagao for the longest time. I actually think that the, quote, undercut by them pitting a little bit earlier is what actually hurt you a little bit, because they got out, had a couple of laps to themselves. He comes out and is like, well, that didn't work out so good. And he's kind of stuck. So, yeah, shout out to Mark Connell getting another podium. Been a little bit for him, but definitely earned it today.
Let's talk a little bit about the sub championship. You got the championship. You knew going into the race that Marcin Balazzi, who was eligible, wasn't making the round. John Kimbrell, also eligible for it, wasn't making the round. Did that change your mindset at all, or did you look at you look at the race any differently, or did you just treat it like anything else?
I mean, so the biggest thing, and you know, this has come from racing Grands and racing Machismo, you just have to treat every race like another race, right? So I'm never thinking about these points or sub-champions or whatever. I'm just going to go out there and it's a race, right? So no, it doesn't matter to me at all.
Well, that's a good way to look at it. I think. I mean, at the end of the day, when you've got that many rounds already on your belt with the solid points, again, the nice thing is it is what it is. You didn't have to do anything. It was just, well, I already earned the championship. You could, whether you liked it or not, could go at this thing with another, you know, just it is what it is. It's the same old race.
Well, let's talk about going into the second half. Let's talk a little bit about the guys who are going to continue to be contenders. Adam, you're leading the championship at 298, which, considering there's only 3 scored rounds, that means you lost 2 points. So you're slacking a little bit. Diego Morales moved up. He's the guy who has a 0 for a drop. There's several guys up front that have 0s for drops. Also 2 wins. He's at 276, so he's 22 behind you. Then you have John Kimbrell, who may or may not run the rest of the season.
Right.
He sits 3rd. And then you have a tie between Taylor Hayes, the last year's sweep champion, and then Marcin Balazzi, who's new to this Ironman thing.
Right.
Followed by Mark Connell. You have Sergio, you have Sean, Nick, Henry, Steve, myself, Ariel. Let's talk a little bit about the guys. Is there anyone that you expect to take that leap in the second half? It's not the championship is not by any means gone at this point. Sorry, Adam. It's still a very big contest, especially with as many guys up front that have 0s, that have
there's opportunities to gain a lot of points when everybody that has a 0 is going to absolutely take home what they earn. I think out of the gate, let's say that John doesn't run. Hayes is automatically in the game, and actually I think Hayes is what we're going to see a stronger second half of the year. Obviously, Classico is a good run for him, and he didn't drive poorly or have bad runs at the 2 counterclockwise rounds. It was just that the same 3 guys had really good rounds. So I think he finished a 4th and a 6th or something like that, those 2 rounds. So he's not doing poorly. Hayes is going to be the guy who's going to end up having a resurgence, I believe. He knows how to get things done. He's still one of the fastest, if not the fastest in the pit lane. And you can't count him out at all. Besides him, I think consistency's got to lean towards Connell. I think he's going to be a little bit of a surprise. I think he could find a little bit more. He's driving better now than he has at the beginning of the season. There's just something a little bit different. He's driving better, and I think that he could find a little bit more. Whether it's going to be top 3 podiums or race wins or anything like that or not, I think we're going to see, instead of these 8, 7, 6 right in there. It's going to be like a 5, 4, 3 that we're going to start seeing him live in that area.
That's a big difference. Is there anyone that you've raced with this year in the first half of the season that that may put a little worry into you for the second half?
For a while, like, I was actually concerned about Marcin, right? Marcin, it's his first year doing Ironman, but, those 2 wins I have, it was him pushing me the entire time, basically. And I would turn around and I'm like, oh, okay, he's still with me. Okay. I haven't dropped you yet. This is okay. So, I'm really impressed with what he's been doing. And I hope that, if he's doing grands, he does grands, and he gets some confidence, a little bit more confidence, and he'll send it on these guys, like me, Diego, John. I would love to see that.
I don't know that he's not sending it. I'm actually thinking that he's driving pretty smart currently. Like, at least when you look at the Super Series, I think he drives less smart in the Super Series than he does the Ironman. In the Super Series, I've seen him do things like attack when maybe you shouldn't attack so much. Conversely, here in the Ironman, I see him hang tight and chill. He just hasn't been in the right place yet at the end of the race. With your guys' strategies, always leaving the pits to the end.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the race, it was like you and John, and Marcin getting hung up by traffic somehow.
Yeah.
Almost every time, and he's pitted at different times and things like that. So he hasn't been there yet to give it a go. I think that could be part of it.
Marcin will probably get angry because I'm going to tell this story, but in the second round, where I ended up finishing like 5th, I think Taylor was 4th, and Marcin was 3rd, and I was congratulating him. He was like, I almost blew it, and I was like, what do you mean you almost blew it? He's like, I had to stop, and at his first stop, he's like, I pit, and I forgot how many pit stops we had to make. He's like, I had to stop and ask someone, how many stops do we have? And that's what ended up losing him so much time. He still finished 3rd, so I'm giving him a hard time, but he still has more hardware than I do this year, so.
That's why it's always good to really know the rules, really know what you're supposed to do.
No, that kid doesn't need to know the rules. He runs so fast, it doesn't matter.
Just seem to have a bit of a knack.
Just point it, yeah,
Indeed,
just point it.
Indeed.
Anything you're looking forward to before we move on, at least for the Ironman for the second half? Obviously, like you said, there's 3 tracks that are counterclockwise and Classico, which, in my opinion, it's the hardest Ironman that we have during the year because it's usually the hottest. It's the shortest lap, which means you do the most laps, and it tends to be the most physical because there's very little time. Yeah, there's very little time to relax. Mm-hmm. And it just becomes very mentally draining. Last year, I'll give you an example. Last year, I passed 3 people in the last 5 laps because they just were exhausted.
Yeah.
And that's just what happens.
And to that point, yeah, exactly. It's tough on the drivers. It's a tough track to be fast on. And one of the things that you also see every single time is the fact that mistakes hurt you so much because it is so tight. And going through you do a little bit of a bobble, and you've been working so hard. It's very indoor, the feel of that place, because it's a little bit tighter. Obviously we also move the barriers closer and everything like that with the new, Classico Grand Prix that happens in the Super Series. So it's tight. You got to be dead on with that kind of stuff. You go through the S's and you mess that thing up, a little bit over here, a little bit over there, and you see that gap that you've been working on gone. And it's almost demoralizing at that point. So it's tough mentally, physically, the whole bit. And to your point, it's not the coldest time of year either.
I'm interested in seeing Taylor, how he does on Classico, and I'm interested in challenging Taylor on Classico. I want to see, how it goes. Right? I think I've done okay on Classico. I've never been crazy fast on Classico, but it'll definitely be interesting to see if this Classico round gives Taylor that little boost he needs to carry it to the end. And I would really like to see that. You don't want to just win with no one competing with you, right?
From your standpoint, being the point leader and going into having this break, right? That doesn't happen in the Super Series, right? We go every month. You got Grands, which is kind of an unofficial break in the season, but you have a proper break in the Ironman and Sprint Series championships. Do you think it changes the mindset, or do you think it kind of gives everybody a reset button, and like it was for Pat Britton when he won the overall championship? When Pat was out front, he was going for all the championships, right? So he won the first one, and he was going for the second one. Then here comes Aaron Downs, right? Because you don't have to run any of the first 4. Mm-hmm. Fresh face. Now, to that point, Aaron Downs isn't here. If Aaron Downs all of a sudden decides to run the second half of the season, he's on it. or Sergio, any of these guys further down that just get it done, like a Hayes or anything like that. Do you think it's a huge change with the reset button of having this big long gap, or do you think it's a detriment of kind of going, oh yeah, we got to go Ironman racing in July because it's 3 months later?
If there was no racing in between, I think it would hurt you. But because in between we're also doing Super Series and we're doing Grands, I don't think it's as big of a deal. But I will definitely agree that for people, it's going to be, they're going to come back second half, and they're going to be driving completely different.
It's almost like the opener again.
Yeah, I agree. That's, it's going to be really interesting to see. Taylor, I know he's been doing okay. He wants to do better, of course. I think that's what's going to happen with Taylor. And I think the same might happen for Sergio. Right. We have people who are typically at the front. Not, they're not way back, but not where they normally are.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see if it does reset like that.
Let's move on to the Super Series. We've got a race in a couple weeks. It'll be round 5. We have an incredibly close championship right now when you factor in 2 drops. But if you were to ask anyone that is following the results, they would just say that it's been a Calvin kind of year. Adam, let's talk about you. Congratulations on winning your first one. You are the first driver to have all 3 wins. You've got a sprint win, you've got an Ironman win, and now you've got a Super Series win. That must be a little bit of an honor to have that. Let's talk about challenging the Calvins. I know that they've been so good this year. They're always very good. Do you go into any races and measure yourself against them or anything like that, or are you just going and trying to put out the best result possible?
No, definitely. I think anyone in the top 10 or top 20, whatever, they'll definitely size each other up. If I'm running with Logan, I'll be like, oh, you get on the throttle there, interesting, okay, and I'll try to see what I can do to start doing that, or maybe a little bit earlier. So definitely, I have this memory in my head where I think we were doing Grande CCW, and he was getting on the Logan was getting on the throttle like half a second, 3/4 of a second before everyone else. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. No, I don't think anyone else has noticed that. So I started doing that. I started working out. So, yeah, definitely. It's good to size up everyone else and see what they're doing, see what you can borrow from them, and, see their weaknesses, their strengths, and kind of play that game.
Mike, let's talk a little about how the A-mains have developed these first 4 rounds. A lot of times it's been a breakaway. You've got a group of like 4 or 5 guys and then breaking away, and that ends up being the battle for the podium. Is that different than how things normally have been in Super Series, or what are your thoughts?
Well, certainly it's what everybody wants at the front, right? I mean, if you talk to any of the front running guys, they're going to say that's exactly what they want. They're going to try and play nice in the beginning, try to pull away, so it's just that front group. We've had multiple different people do guest instructing at the clinics, and that's what they're doing. That's what they're telling people. Learn to not make the move. Learn to work together to try to pull away. And if you think about it, at the end of the day, you want to be inside that top 5 in the last 5 or so laps. It matters. Well, when you're not in the top 5, you want to be in the top 5. There's only one way to do that. You can't, like we talked about in the clinic today. It's almost a good idea in 3rd, 4th, 5th to just stay 3rd, 4th, 5th for about 10 or so laps in the A main. If you're 15th, it's not a good idea to stay 15th. You got to go forward. Going forward costs you time because you got to battle, you got to fight, and working your way up. So by default, we should almost always have a breakaway because of the nature of the game. Now that being said, is it abnormal or anything like that? I don't know if it's abnormal. It's just that when we don't have the breakaway, it's because somebody or some people were not on the same page in that first 5 to 8 people.
Yeah, I've been there this year.
You are that this year.
I am. Whatever. Let's talk a little bit about the last round. We have Grande counterclockwise. It was an incredibly close race, a huge battle between everyone in the field. Adam, you obviously won that. Let's talk about how it developed going into the last few laps. You found your way. I believe you started 8th, if I remember correctly.
8th or 9th.
Yeah, you started a little farther back than a normal A main winner does. Like, how did you end up getting yourself into position to be in the right place?
You know, I was kind of surprised starting that far back and being able to catch up to the leaders, because typically they do break away. That's the whole thing, right? So
And these rounds are a little different because when we have rolling starts, you can
Yeah.
be back in 15th and you can find your way forward. I found that out in the
You
last
get
round.
half that in lap 1.
Yeah, you can start. I mean, you can start like 20th and find your way into the top 10 and slowly get in there.
Yeah.
With the standing starts, it's been very
Yeah,
different.
and I'll be honest with you, to slide that in there, as an official, the standing start is so much better.
Yeah, I would
It's
think
just,
so.
I as an official, it's much easier, or I should say, less hard for us to call. At the end of the day, it's nice that we can actually get to the racing and out of the BS a heck of a lot quicker. If you guys remember the oval, or excuse me, the oval, the standing starts versus the oval starts and the rolling starts. The
Well,
rolling
we
starts
do have
going
rolling
into
starts for the oval. That's
right,
true.
which God help us all. So we go through the bus stop into the forward direction, right, and it's just shoving people, right, and you go in the reverse direction, and we're shoving people. You do the standing starts, just like the heats, but now you guys are side by side this year. It's still not even nearly as bad as it used to be.
No.
And we can actually, once you guys funnel through, like when we should see in a couple of weeks, once you funnel through the bus stop, funnel through down the hill, the shenanigans don't really start to happen until we get down to Scandy and Hairpin and all that kind of good stuff. Well, at least we've made it through a few corners instead of someone getting pushed out wide, that kind of stuff. So I personally am a huge fan of not doing the rolling starts.
I think, you know, initially I wanted to do the rolling starts because that's
Yeah.
what makes the A main the A main.
Exactly.
But I think it's good because the rolling starts, you're either going to make a lot of positions up or you're going to go way back.
Yeah, you're either going to be in the right line or
it's
the wrong
one or the
line.
other,
Yeah.
like completely, right? Where these standing starts, you can make up a couple positions. You might lose a couple positions, but you know you're not going way forward. You're
Still
not
in the
going way
game,
back.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you're starting up front in a rolling start, you're like, please don't lose a bunch of spots. Please let my line go.
Yeah.
But if you're in the back on a rolling start, you're like,
You're like,
all right,
yeah.
yeah, I'm going to make it 3 wide. I'm going to dive bomb
yeah,
this.
because I have a stuck throttle.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I missed the breaking point. I'm so
Somehow
sorry.
it's stuck throttle
They hit
through
the
first few corners and it magically gets better. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your progress through the field, at least for the A main, to put yourself in position. When did you know that you had a shot? You've had shots before, but when did you know you had another shot at it?
You know, I felt really confident in the cart. I could put it where I wanted, and it was okay with it, right? I didn't have any complaints about the cart. So I knew when I was going through the field, I was like, okay, maybe I have a little bit of a chance. When I got in the top 5 or so, if you're in the top 5, I think you have a chance, like for sure, right? It just comes down to what happens. Now, I went up farther than that, and I worked up my way to the lead, I think, at some point. And I was like, okay, I think I want to be leading, you know, at the end of this thing, but we'll see how this goes, right? And we had both Calvins up there. We had Patrick up there.
Aaron was like 5th.
Aaron was right there as well.
Aaron and Bill, I think Bill and Henry were up there, yeah.
Yeah, you know, you kind of just hang out and you see what happens. I don't really think there's anyone that can say, "Oh, hey, I got this," right? In an A main, right? So I was just hanging out and see what happens. So
Put yourself in position and hopefully you're still there at the end.
yeah.
So I'm going to ask the question that I think a lot of people want to be asked. The few A mains that I've been to this year, the last lap has definitely been aggressive by the guys up front. Maybe not more so than normal, but there's definitely been a lot of contact. It was that way on Sportivo. It was that way in Grande counterclockwise. A little bit of technical. I think there was a little bit of a gap, if I remember correctly. Is the race officiated at all differently between lap 1 and the last lap, knowing the consequences of any said call?
No, the race is officiated the same from lap to lap. It does, however, change where you are in the field and what you're doing, like in a heat race versus an A main. It depends on who we're talking about, right? For instance, I call it A main a hell of a lot different than I call a Sprint Series B main. Let's just throw that out.
By the
there.
way, I want to give credit to the guys that did the Sprint Series B main today. That was an awesome
Especially
race.
if you were here for last month's
Yes,
B-Main.
last month's was really bad, and
Real
this
bad.
month, I mean, they were going 3 and 4 wide,
Yeah.
legitimately, and it was a pack of 8, and it was a fun race. I got to
It was
give
good.
credit to those
It was
guys.
good. As far as the officiating, going back to the A-Main, as far as the officiating goes, no, we call it the exact same way. I don't really care if it's lap 1 or lap 15. And at the sharp end, halfway through, yeah, it's going to be called the same way. That being said, if you're in the A-Main and you're the sharp end of the A-Main, you know what you are doing.
Correct.
People do not accidentally get into other people. You know, sometimes you go a little bit deep or whatever. But it's still within the realm of racing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not called any differently. That being said, the biggest bit is that there is more experience at the front, and every little thing that a driver knows how to do is going to happen right there. So that's what you're also keeping an eye on. Versus, let's just say, middle of the B-Main. Pretty quick, kind of know what you're doing, but maybe you don't know a lot of little tricks, a little BS, if you will, right? That's the stuff that you guys start to do. As far as the aggressive thing, I brought that up in the clinic today. Aggressive sometimes is a bad word. There's nothing wrong with being aggressive. Aggressive is still just racing, right? It's kind of like, I use this analogy in the clinic. It's kind of like 2-point conversions. If you get it, you're a hero.
Yeah.
You don't get it, boy, are you going to hear about it, right? It's one of those things. And sometimes, you know, if you make it happen, you're still going to hear about it. Like, well, you just got lucky that you got it done, or whatever, right? You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. As far as the aggression goes, though, everybody at the front knows what they're doing. And everybody at the front should be able to handle what's going on, too. And we try to let everybody race. So that's how it's officiated.
Yeah, I think it just. I'll give you an example. Today I raced. I see him talking and being a drunk. I raced Mark Connell super hard today for the time that he got by me, and it was one of those situations where I knew I needed to be in front of him because I needed the push. And I talked to him after. I was like, I apologized. I was like, I raced you ridiculously hard. Like, I'm talking about like, no, I'm not giving you room. I'm making contact on the straight so that you don't get by.
Literally all the stuff that's not going to make you any friends.
Exactly.
Right.
All of the things that are just bad ideas.
Everyone hates Chris Huerta right now. Yeah,
But-
those things.
But I talked to him after, and he was like, "Yeah." I looked at him and was like, "Man, you were driving me really hard." But then I saw you go backwards, and I went, "Oh, that's why he was racing me so hard, because he needed to be up there." And I think that's one of the things that you learn over time, and you learn when you're running in the A, in the front of the A, is when there's times to be aggressive and when there's times to push.
Well, like we were talking about earlier, you don't do anything the first few laps if you're already there. If you're already there, you want to stay there.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to stay there, be smart. Don't make moves. You make moves, you go slower. That's how it works. Congratulations, you went from 5th to 4th. You lost 3 seconds to the guys behind you because you just did a pit maneuver into the friggin' hairpin. That's dumb. You got to play it smart.
Yeah, I think, like what Chris is saying, I think that's one of the biggest things in the A is if you are not confident in your car, or maybe you're not confident in the track or whatever, you're going to drive a little bit different. You're going to defend a little bit more, right? As soon as people see that, they're like, oh, this guy, maybe he's not, fully confident. So they're going to want to pass you just that much more.
Right, and actually that was brought up at the last recap that we had. Pat was saying that, like, when you're out front, you try to keep it a little bit more open, keep it flowing, because and Logan has said this during the clinics. If he's seeing somebody in front of him that's doing normal lines, hitting the regular marks, he'll work with that person. That person starts going defense, they try to dispatch that person because that person is playing behind him. They're trying to hold on to what they have instead of trying to play the big picture game. And that was what was interesting, is during this last round, to your point about it not having that breakaway and whatnot, might be because the leader was going defense. So it changed the total complexity of what was normally happening at the front of the A-Main.
Okay, the reason I wanted to acknowledge the guys that are in the top 10. You have a guy that's 11, Sergio Serrano, who's unfortunately probably not going to run the rest of the season. Darren Mercer, who's not going to run the rest of the season. You have Matt Hart, Prieto, who may run the rest of the season, and John. So I really wanted to acknowledge the top guys that are up front. You've got Logan, who's leading the points. Aaron Scott, who's in second, who somehow separated the two Calvins, who's Miles is third. You've got Sergio Bravo, who no one's talking about, but apparently decided he wants to be fourth in points. He's not had.
He's been up there.
Yeah, he's been up there, but he's not. At least in my opinion, he hasn't made like that significant noise yet. He hasn't found the top step of the
You
podium.
remember when he won a championship, though? It was very similar.
That's true. You have Adam, who's fifth. You have Pat Britton, who may or may not continue to run in sixth. You've got Charles. You've got Eichlin, Bill Krieg, Henry, and Diego. So you have a wonderful mixture of experience and newcomers.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, is there anyone in particular that you see in that top 10 that you look at and you go, wow, he's running top 10 right now?
Kinda, except for it's more just it's cool. I'm happy to see it. It's Aaron Scott. Aaron Scott's decided to race, really, because we've seen this from Aaron Scott. Remember, Aaron Scott.
People forget he finished seventh in points.
I was just going to say, Adam Nagao did the Aaron Scott by being up there. Wes Dent did the Aaron Scott by being the guy who nobody knew, and all of a sudden, holy crap, he's going for hardware? That's an Aaron Scott. That's what that is. And now
we call that a Taz, by the way.
2013 Taz.
Yeah, 2013 Taz. That's what we refer to.
Nobody knows what that is. So anyways, Aaron Scott is up there, and it's not a surprise. He is driving good. He's driving smart. He's making things happen. And the one thing that's interesting about Aaron Scott is that he doesn't really get bogged down by the BS.
No.
He just goes and races. And because he wears a clear shield all the time, you can just look at, he's just smiling the whole time. He's got this weird smile.
Well,
and he's just enjoying himself. He's like, he just got wrecked, still smiling. So Aaron Scott, that's the guy. Right
to be fair, he's getting married in 364 days, so he's got to look forward to only so much.
Is that what it is? Okay.
He'll be mad I said that.
Yep.
Whatever.
But besides Aaron Scott, you got a lot of usual suspects up there. I'd be curious to see if Henry Morris runs the whole thing, if he's up there. I mean, he's always had the speed. Bill Craig's always been in that game, whatnot. So Andres Priedo's only going to get better. For whatever reason, it just hasn't quite clicked yet in the Super Series, and I've been working with him a little bit on practice days by trying to figure out what that is, because obviously it clicks at Grands. But you got a lot of talent in that top 10 right now, a lot of talent, and just outside the top 10. It's all to play for, and we still got most of the season to go.
Is there anybody in the top 10 that, if you're looking at a heat race chart and you see him on that you feel comfortable with? That you feel like, okay, I can work with this person. I can make moves and nothing dumb will happen.
Well, I think the best person that I'd want to race with is John, right? John knows the game, and John appreciates if you make a move on him, he's not upset. He's like, yeah, that's the game. This is what it is, right? So I think definitely seeing John on the heat race list, that's like, yes, right? At the same hand, if I see Taylor on there, or, I see Prieto, sometimes I'll race with Prieto. Prieto's good.
What about Calvin?
So the deal with the Calvins is they are a lot of fun to race. And racing them, you'll learn a lot of stuff. I mean, you'll work your fucking ass off, right? But you're going to learn a lot of stuff. So I don't mind racing the Calvins. I find it's really fun.
But it's certainly going to be a challenge.
It's going to be a challenge.
I beat a Calvin this year. I marked
Did
that
they
in
get a mechanical?
No, I marked it in my diary. No, Wes pushed me to that win. Thanks, Wes. Appreciate that one.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the amount of talent you have at the sharp end. And like you said before, it's mental. That's the difference. We've talked about it in clinics. We've seen it out here. We've talked to all kinds of drivers. There's not much separating the front, and it's all upstairs.
Let's skip to one of the sub-championships. The defending, we'll go to Grand Masters. You have your defending champion, Dennis Kimbrell, followed by Brian Starr, Joe Sabella, who's right there. A very close battle between Starr, Sabella, Frame. You have Roger Adams, Tom Zevin, Tony Wicca. Is the Grandmasters last year was one of the better championships because there was such a battle behind Dennis. Unfortunately, Dennis is just really, really damn good.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a championship that you like to watch? And as you look at guys that aren't running for the overall, aren't running in the A main, is that something you watch in like the B and C main?
That's what I like about all the sub championships. You can find a little bit of something different. But the nice thing about the Grandmasters is a lot of them live in the sharp end of the B main. And this is what also makes it fun. They're very hot cold. Sometimes
Yes.
they show up and sometimes they don't, and that's what makes it the ebb and flow of the points. They've all got A main capability in them. It's just whether or not they decide to flip the switch that day.
Is there any one of any one of them you want to highlight here in the first third of the season that you feel like could make that leap if they run grands? They can make a charge, maybe even challenge Dennis. It's only a 100-point gap. We're only talking about 108 points, and when you're talking about 8 races left, that's all. That's not much.
I think what's tough is when you start figuring things out, you start getting a little bit overzealous, start pushing a little bit too much. And I think that's what we see in that group, is that they're starting to get things dialed in a little bit, or they find a little bit more, and they know they need a little bit more, and they go and they overstep it. We've seen that a little bit. At the end of the day, that is the class that needs the consistency. If they actually would do what they could do on a regular basis, it'd be a completely different class. And to that point, I think Brian Starr's got the best shot at it. He fought for that championship in the first season, the first Grandmaster season, and didn't quite make it. Ended up finishing second, I think, to Dennis and then Jeff Latimer. Latimer's always in that group too. Starr got a late start. If he shows up, he could take it to Kimbrough.
Another championship that has, I think, 8 legitimate contenders at finishing between 2nd and 7th is Masters. You know, you have Sergio and Diego that are up front. The question with Diego is always, is he going to run all the races?
Right.
But you've got 3rd is Mark Connell, 4th is Steve Spring, 5th is Ariel Rubio, 6th is Vince Burke, 7th is Nathan Hood, and then 8th, the guy who just hasn't found his stride yet this year, is you have Jose De Silva. Is there? Let's talk about that group of 8 guys. How much fun is it racing with? How much fun is it racing with those guys? And do you look at any of the Masters guys differently because they're older?
Wow. No, I think I race them the same. You know, it's always, you know, whenever you look at the sheet and you see a Diego or Sergio in your race, you're like, okay, this is going to be a little bit of work, right? At the same, you know, on the other hand, Jose's a really nice guy and he drives really well.
He makes great drinks.
And he'll race you well, right? But like you guys said, maybe a little bit of consistency issues. But if he can get that dialed in, I think Jose could do really well.
And that's a guy who he was going for an overall podium, in that class. So it's about him not hitting the marks. If he were to do what he knows how to do, he'd be fighting up there.
Next sub-championship is the one that I think I wonder what's going to happen going forward. You know, we've been spoiled the last few years with rookie championships. I mean, you had Sergio, you had the Serrano championship last year where he came out of nowhere, made a charge, led it. You had the year before, which was Wes Dent and Roman Alexenkov, them going.
Phenomenal.
That was a phenomenal championship, from grands on. And then the year before that, you had a 5-way championship. You had Steve, you had Charles Eichlin, you had Tolman, you had Wojstadt, you had Lemons, you had Ian. That was, the epitome.
That was the best one.
That was the best one for sure. Yeah. And this year, we have some questions about the guys that are going to run for the rookie championship.
Questions I think have actually gotten a little bit answered. I've been talking to, actually, for those who don't know, I work with Alex Bermudez literally every week. Literally every week he's here on Wednesday. And he's got the ability.
There's got to be better things for you to do, Alex. I'm sorry.
I don't think that there is, really. But he's getting seat time in, and like all rookies, there are things to work on right now. The big downside to everybody else in the rookie fight is the fact that he actually thinks he can run the rest of the season. He's making the shift. He's making the focus to actually run the entire year. So now, Justin Schuler, if you guys want to do coaching, come on down. Because Schuler is your number 2 contender. He's the number 2 challenger. He's the primary contender to take the fight to Alex, and he's getting better. But Alex does have a leg up on the rest of the guys. He's just seat time. This is no substitute.
Let's talk a little bit about when you were a rookie, which I think was 2013, which was the
same year as
Steve all them.
Yeah.
I think it was the same year as Aaron as well, if I remember correctly. I don't remember. Whatever.
I don't think they ran the whole season.
Oh, no, they didn't. Neither of them did. Let's talk about taking that leap as a rookie. When you realize, okay, I've got some pace. I'm starting to figure some things out, and all of a sudden you make your first A main. And you're like, I'm here. I've arrived. Let's talk about that feeling.
Let's talk about how you win 4 B mains to stay inside the A main. Let's talk about that. Which was that next year, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So, I think like Mike said, seat time is definitely the biggest thing you can do. The more you can be in the cart, the better you're gonna do, right? After that, you're gonna find some pace with that. After that is a mental game and the racecraft game, right? I find that in Super Series, a lot of people have the pace, but they're not playing the mental game, right? We talk about these little tricks and things in the A. No one else in the field does that. It's just the front of the A, right? So if they can start doing these little tricks, maybe a little racecraft, that's what they'll be really set, right? But as being new and starting in the A, you start to notice these little tricks, and you're like, hey, that guy did that because he knew I would be here on this next corner, or whatever, right? So you'll start to pick up on it, and hopefully you start doing it yourself and, going a little forward, right?
Is there any message that you want, or that, is there any one thing that a rookie can do to go from not struggling, but trying to reach that A main? Is there any one thing they can do?
Well, if they haven't done a clinic and they haven't done any coaching, that's big. And not just because, hey, we make more money. Nothing like that. But literally, it comes down to getting the information from people better than you. And I don't mean a little bit better, the way it is like if you're a rookie and you make the back of the B and you're learning from people at the front of the B. I mean someone way more experienced that can actually watch you, understand what you're doing right, wrong, or indifferent, and give you a hand. The biggest frustration to rookies or new drivers is when they hit a plateau, when they just don't know what they're doing wrong yet. Getting out there with a more experienced driver, whether it be someone at the head of a team, like a Logan, or myself, whatever it may be, getting out here for a clinic, getting some sage advice from some of the either guest instructors or more experienced people. You learn things. You got to know what you're doing wrong to get better. You have to fail a little bit to improve, and that's the big thing. If you don't know what you're doing, if you needed to get a little bit better, yeah, seat time, but good seat time, where you're actually knowing what to work on.
Yeah, I mean, I attribute a lot of my success to working with John, working with Taylor, working with Mike, and they just tell you things that you wouldn't think about, right? There's all the time where John will tell me little tricks, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I've never thought of it like that before. So yeah, if you can definitely maybe find someone to take you under your wing, or maybe make friends with someone, they'll definitely help you out. This entire field, anyone will help anyone out. So yeah, approach someone, talk to them.
What's the worst that could happen?
Exactly. Since you guys are talking about teams, we'll cap on the team championship, just because that tends to be the one that has such a high influx of movement.
Mm-hmm.
We had a championship last year that was decided off track.
Of Jesus.
Yeah,
Right.
literally because of Jesus. Let's acknowledge the top five. You have CRD Gold, which is Chris Miller, Drew Zeller, and Miles Calvin. That's a question mark. We don't know if Zeller's going to run the rest of the season. You have T4 Witcher, which is Marcin Balazzi, Matt Hart, and Tom Zevin. A little bit of a question on that because Matt Hart decided he wants to have a life and a career. Yeah, exactly. So he's off doing real estate things. You have CRD, which unfortunately has two Calvins on that team. It's Logan Calvin and Cody Calvin, and then Steve Jasinski, someone who has a ton of experience and a ton of laps that continues to get better. And anytime Steve's in the A main or up front, no one is surprised by that. You have Fast and the Furious, which is Andres Prieto, like I mentioned, is getting faster. Ashley Arnaud, who is our sub-champion, our winter sub-champion, and another champion in Dennis Cambrell. So you literally have two champions and Andres Prieto. So that's not a bad third drive. That's not a bad third drive.
I like how it's Dennis Cambrell and Ashley Arnaud are champions, and
the guy who wins super finals. Yeah, he just Maybe we should, if you label the A main, do you think if we labeled it a super final, do you think he just wins? He just wins out. We're like, what? We go out there to qualify and
he's out there.
Yeah. But I do want to acknowledge the leading team, which is, unfortunately, it's Vince Burke is on that team. Chris Carter, who has a team championship, and Aaron Scott, who is probably watching the Ducks game right now. Go Predators.
I don't even know what a Predator is.
The game's over?
The game's over, they won.
Oh, man, I'm so going to drink now even more. Mike, let's talk about the team champion. Let's talk about the team championship and the team elements. Obviously, last year you had a ton of teams. This year you have another bunch of teams. That's the hardest one to obviously score because you're talking about 3 points. But
Right.
how much enjoyment do you get out of seeing guys that don't have a championship necessarily to go for group together and run for something?
Well, actually, I'll be honest with you. I don't really pay too close of attention to the team championship per se, but I do look at the team camaraderie and the improvement of those lower drivers. The way the thing is built, and by lower drivers, I mean like
You mean
guys
Vinceburg.
lower
You mean
points.
Vinceburg.
No,
That's
I
what you
don't.
mean.
And well, one time maybe I would have, but no, it's about you have to take people who are lower on the point value and you have to help them improve. A good team has got a good leader, has got good people that help out. It's about helping somebody else out. That's why I like the team championship, because you're coaching. You care about them getting better. There's really no reason to hold anything back or anything like that. That's the championship I like, and I really don't pay too close of attention to it to the very, very end of the season because there's so much ebb and flow. But you can see people that are a lower value driver that get in on a team, and they just blossom. They get a lot better, they learn a lot, and they have more fun for it.
Adam, you've had a chance in the last little bit to do a little bit of coaching with some guys. Do you see that improving your game as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, there's actually a saying, like, when you teach stuff, you remember 80% of it or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I find when I help people out, I remember it better.
Yeah, not a lot of people know you tutor calculus and a little bit of
I guess.
robotics. Congratulations, by the way,
Well,
on
thank you.
the you got a podium in robotics.
Yeah.
You
I
may
mean,
have
the robot went on fire.
exactly, it's pretty awesome. Those of you who don't know, Adam does robotics. So if you ever have a drone fly over your house and it seems a little creepy and scary, it's definitely from Adam. I just want to point that out now.
Skynet's going to be your
Little
fault
strange.
then. Your fault.
I guess.
But
So-
but as far as coaching, I mean, you get some enjoyment and you obviously improve yourself as well.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think if you're teaching people, you're going to remember it better. And stuff that maybe you knew but wasn't, you weren't actively thinking about will come up again. And I've noticed that a lot. I guest instructed at a clinic, and there was things that I didn't really think about, but when I explained it, I was like, oh yeah, that is a thing. That is something I do.
If I remember correctly, that was the worst sprint race of the season, correct? The one that he.
What?
No, I think that last one's the worst one.
Oh, that was-
Before that was.
He's up right. He
technical, yeah.
didn't do that one. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I like how you try to
advice
put the blame on Adam. But
My advice was just like send it. Just
yeah, that is true. That was the advice. That's no joke. That being said, to cement that point, it's easy to sometimes get complacent with the stuff the fundamentals that you used to work on. As a coach, you're constantly talking about the fundamentals. I mean, anybody who's in the clinics has heard me beat a dead horse about it, but as a coach doing it with multiple different people, I probably work with over 50 different drivers a year or more outside of the clinics. You're constantly saying the same stuff. You can't help but have good vision because you're constantly working on it. You can't help but turn your head because you're trying to show them how to turn it, so on and so forth. So yeah, as a coach, you can't help but get a little bit better. Maybe not the really, really good, but definitely know the fundamentals and the basics down pat.
Well, we've covered pretty much everything as far as Super Series, Ironman, Sprint. Congratulations on a successful first third of the season.
Not too
Congratulations on
Thanks.
a championship. Is
Thank
there
you.
anyone behind the scenes that you guys want to acknowledge or thank?
Well,
Yeah.
first off, I want to say we're not doing any more with Pat, but thanks to Pat Britton
Oh, absolutely.
for doing the original with Growler Garage and like that. Couldn't really do it anymore. He's not going to be coming out doing the Super Series so much. I really hate driving to Fullerton. It worked out a little bit that way. Huge thanks to you to stepping up and making this happen.
Oh, this is terrible. So
Yeah,
it will
you're-
never happen again.
Yeah, exactly. We're probably going to get flooded with a bunch of hate mail for the new host, but we'll
Well, you might
find
get some
our
love
way to
letters.
get around it. Yeah, but no, seriously, thanks for coming out, and
No
then
problem.
thanks for Adam for being the guest, and congratulations on the success so far.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
You don't want to acknowledge it?
No, well, if I will say something, I will say, TA left, right? We got some new staff here at Calspeed. They've been doing a really good job.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know I personally was a little scared with TA leaving us. Like, what's going to happen? We're not sure, but so far things have been going really well.
Yeah, they did a great job. They did that. They screwed up Sean's cart, which was ideal. Yeah, exactly. It was just ideal.
That's deserved.
But they balanced. But they did the good. But then they balanced it out.
Yeah.
You are the reason why there's no Calspeed logo on this. We may certainly be. Would you like to host this show? Send me an email, mike@calspeedkarting.com.
Don't worry, I could edit this part out. Whatever. Thank you to both of you. Hopefully we're here. I'm drenched in champagne after the oval. You can finish second again.
Let's not repeat that.
We talk. Yeah, we chat about that. That we're gonna switch the order, but we're gonna put Ian second next time. But it's okay. So hopefully we're
Sign up for the oval. That's basically what he's saying. Sign up for the oval.
Yeah, if I can win it, that says so that
Anyone
anyone can win it.
Anyone can.
Exactly. We will hopefully be here for the oval, which will recap that as well as Super Series, and then we will start looking
Grands
a little bit more towards Grands.
Absolutely.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me, and thank you for joining us on the Calspeed month of April recap. Though we've been talking so long, it might be May now.
Possible.